Well, good morning, but in some cases, good afternoon and good evening from wherever in the world you're joining us live from the city of Oshawa in the region of Durham. My name is Ali Hirji, and all of you know me as the individual that works at the AI Hub alongside some fascinating companies across the Durham region. Not only do I get to work in AI, I also get to work in security and a whole bunch of other areas as well, including blockchain, which reminds me at the end of this conference today, the closing keynote will be on smart contracts, machine learning, and hacking, and I highly recommend that you join all of the remaining sessions for the day and engage in the learning. One of the things that I often tell my students when I teach about various subjects in AI is that questioning does not change you. It actually reveals you. The way in which you can respond to questions, the way in which you can respond to being interrogated about the AI model or the predictions that you're bringing forward actually should not change you dramatically. It should reveal you. If you're able to answer questions, if you're able to receive feedback, if you're able to engage in that process of dialogue about this mathematical genius that you may have achieved, that's the right step that you want to be taking. Sure, as I've said before, AI is never a final product. It is always a process. And to discuss that process today, I have four fine individuals who are not only engaged in the world of AI in some shape or fashion, they're doing it in collaboration with our principal investigators, our faculty, and our students at Durham College. My guests today, and I'll obviously get them to introduce themselves as we move forward, are three individuals who have invested tremendously in terms of time, resources at Durham College, and a principal investigator who is of no need of an introduction. We have Asif Khan from GroundLevel Insights, and many of you may know him for also spearheading the launch of CanaTrace. Asif is not only a friend of the college, he's become a close friend to many of our students and a mentor in many cases to them, and sits on a bunch of advisory boards with me as well. Speaking of advisory boards, we also have another individual who really has given me a lot to think about, along with his colleague Mike, in the world of identity access management, someone with whom I did a session last week, seeing a little bit too much of him lately. But if you recall the going passwordless tech talks that I did last week, we have Ketan Kapadia from BlokSec Technologies. And lastly, we have another person who's become a dear friend to Durham College, Richard Bicknell from ShiftLink. I want to thank Richard also for taking the time. He's also come off the heels of his own conference recently, launching a couple of new products. But for taking the time today, it's pretty obvious that he sees value in what we do at Durham College. And I thank him for taking the time to joining us today. And last but not the least, we have Abhilash Marecharla, the infamous AM. He is our principal investigator at Durham College, been with us at the very get-go when we began going to different companies, talking to them about this mysterious concept called AI. And if there's anything that you need to know about Abhilash, it's that the line starts from where Abhilash stands. So he's going to certainly set the record straight when it comes to predicting user behavior and AI. So let's jump right into it. Before I do that, I do also want to give a shout out to all these companies, GroundLevel Insights, BlokSec, and ShiftLink, for not only attending this panel, but sponsoring our conference as well. Not only have they sponsored themselves, they've connected us to different sponsors and partners. And the result of this is that student employment results in it, opportunities result in it, and more importantly, we get to meet more companies with which to do projects with and pitch our ideas. So thank you, gentlemen, for your support. And Richard, on your side, please give a shout out to Julia as well. She's been a tremendous support to our team at Durham College, and I'm looking forward to working on Crystal Ball further with the two of you. So let's begin a little bit with the topic for today. We're going to be looking at predicting user behavior. And for those of you who are embedded in the world of AI, you'd know that before you even get to predicting user behavior, you've got to engage in the practice of pattern recognition. In cognitive sciences, this simply refers to the ability to take a set of images or a set of data, establish patterns within them, and draw predictions from there. Essentially, the process of drawing insights from data. Abhilash, let's start off with you very quickly. Can you help our audience understand when you do the practice of pattern recognition and you use certain models with which to do that, how do you begin that process of engaging in pattern recognition? Abhi?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. Good morning, everyone. Well, pattern recognition is something which is very critical for building AI models. I'll divide pattern recognition into into two parts. One is before machine learning, another one is after machine learning. Now, before machine learning, pattern recognition, we can say, is a technique where we try to identify patterns in the data using the knowledge or the information we already have about the data, or the statistical information we can gain from the data. Now, an example for this is basically, suppose we have an election and we are trying to see or trying to classify who can vote and who cannot vote. Now, the knowledge we already have is a person has to be 18 plus to vote, and if he's under 18, if the person is below 18, he or she cannot is not eligible to vote. Now, that is one knowledge we already have about that data. So using that information, we can actually take the whole entire data set and divide it into someone who's elder, 18 plus, and someone is below. Now, the second rule we can also add on top of that is basically in all democracies, citizens are eligible to vote. So we can take that 18 plus data, and then we can also divide that data into, say, citizens and non-citizens. So like that. So in a broader sense, what we can say is pattern recognition is a way of classifying data based on the information we have. Now, the other one, which I told, like the statistical information, maybe the best example would be like the sales in a car show. So basing on some statistical techniques, like finding the mean and the mode and everything, we can say, okay, like this particular model has been the best seller, like that. So that is before machine learning. Now, after machine learning, like I can say the last 5 years or maybe 6 years or so, because of this this boom in machine learning and the interest in machine learning, which is predominantly driven by the amount of data we have right now. It's humanly not possible for us to draw a logical pattern based on this kind of conditions. Like, I already told about the voting condition. Like, if we add like 4 or 5 other conditions to it, and suppose we are dealing with data which is like millions, it's humanly not possible. Like, it is still possible, but again, it's not worth it. We cannot be spending so much time on that. So now, after machine learning, we can say pattern recognition is a technique of identifying the patterns within the data set using machine learning algorithms.
Absolutely. Now let's work with that just a little bit, Abhilash, because you said, you have to look at the data sets, you got to find patterns, you got to then sort of, from those patterns, you then have to draw some predictions. But the first step to all of this is that, and you've mentioned this a lot of times before, is that you need the right data sets. And you and I have said this all the time, that the biggest room in this AI is the room for improvement. And you can only improve when you've got data. Asif, I want to bring you into the conversation. Asif, when you're doing, for example, location-based data, now you're part of the Location-Based Marketing Association as well, you've founded it, if I'm not mistaken. How do you actually get access to these pools of data, especially if you want to make predictions, for example, or draw patterns in where people are going, for example, from a COVID perspective? How do you get access to some of this data? And are there challenges to give Abhilash the data sets that he needs to do that machine learning pattern recognition work? Asif?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll kind of answer that from kind of the two hats I wear. So one is as the founder and head of the Location-Based Marketing Association, which is a nonprofit global organization that kind of represents sort of the industry around location data and its use, in various models and industries. And I would say from that point of view, I can look at it and say there's a lot of challenges, because globally, what we see consistently in a lot of the work that we do is around legislation, privacy laws. We were heavily involved in the development of GDPR in Europe, and the California Privacy Act, and things like that, that put a lot of limits on the type of data that's sort of now available, and you can see recently, for example, iOS 14 has really put new limits again on what kind of location data and things like that can be shared. So what that's meant for the industry is sort of the range of data that's available is diminishing, and yet at the same time, like any other industry, when challenges are put out there, people always find a way around it, right? People always find new ways to access that data. In looking at my other hat at GroundLevel Insights, we're a startup here in Durham region, and we have huge quantities of data that we either buy, license, or is first party, that we collect through our own IoT platforms and sensors and things like that. So, on the sort of buy license side of things, mobile companies, mobile operators out there, Bell, Rogers, Telus, AT&T, and others, can and do license access to anonymous mobile data. And there are others out there that are aggregating app SDK data around the world as to where mobile devices are at any given time. The challenge with that sort of part of the ecosystem is that data is very, very expensive. It's considered premium. It's not like going and buying a Facebook lookalike group. This is you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a month at minimum, to get high quality, good location data. So if you can get your hands on that, then you're sort of well positioned. And so the way around that is to find proxies, for that. So our CanaTrace system, for example, where we're out, helping businesses with screening and COVID, visitor counts and all of that type of stuff, essentially is a proxy for location. Because if 100 people scan in at a business and answer symptom screening questions and so on, I can say 100 people visited that business, right? So there are many different ways around that. And then the emerging market in the space right now is around sensors. It's around IoT devices and pulling measurements, pulling data, from those devices. And the interesting thing is everything is smart now. It's not just, we had to go and install a Bluetooth beacon to count traffic like we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. Now it's like, hey, that printer sitting in the office, that smoke detector sitting in the office, that whatever, that table is all internet connected. It's all throwing off data, and there are companies trying to gather that and monetize that and so on. So everything is throwing off some sort of fingerprint or digital legacy associated with it. And then if you can get that and give it to somebody like Abhilash, amazing things can happen, right? So
absolutely. Now there's something that I want our audience to pay attention to over here, and I do want to dive a little bit into some of the technicalities. So Abhilash, start thinking about some libraries that people can start using with, or some tools that people can start using to get involved with pattern recognition. But especially for our students that are listening, you'll often hear myself or Professor Sam Plati or Professor Amit Maraj will often talk about this concept of, do we need to go and buy the data, or should we actually go and build it? And when you oscillate between buy and build, it creates for some interesting scenarios. Ketan, I'm going to come to you second, but I'm going to start with Richard, if that's fine with you. Captain Richard from ShiftLink, always the missing link to everybody's problems and solving it at one step at a time. One of the things that you've done very, very well is that you've engaged in a process internally of not necessarily looking for our data externally, but you've looked at the data that you have within the firm. Can you tell us about how did that data sanitization process work? How did you study the data that you have? You worked with Taylor Richardson, Amit Maraj, and now with the AM himself. How was that process like for you? And how did you begin to realize, hold on a second, we're sitting on some pretty useful data within our platform itself? Richard?
Yeah, thanks, Ali. Great to be here. Thank you for the kind invitation as well. I think, that the first conversation you and I had was about the fact that ShiftLink was collecting a tremendous amount of data on a daily basis, posting and awarding shifts to employees across the country thousands of times a day. But we really didn't have a grasp on what value that data had. And I think that's, the kudos to yourself and to Durham College and AI Hub for helping us understand where that could go. And specifically, it comes down to, and what you've already mentioned is behavior.
Yep.
We originally started to look at the behavior of staff members when and where they were responding to shifts, to shift opportunities, that is. The problem that we're ultimately trying to solve is helping organizations fill vacant shifts with their existing staff pool. It can cost organizations a tremendous amount of time and specifically dollars trying to augment their staff on a daily or weekly basis externally. What they really want to try and do is to fill that pipeline with their existing staff members. And so in working with specifically with Abhilash, we obviously started to focus in on staff behavior, but then we also pivoted and started to understand that there was behaviors that were happening at an administrative lens as well. The times of day, the way in which the administrators were engaging with staff. And there can be minor tweaks in how that actually happens that can have a significant impact on the probability of filling a shift internally. And so really just sort of understanding that the scope of behavioral information that can be gleaned from the data was and I know Abhilash would agree. I mean, that's sort of been the breakthrough for us, is what we had once thought was a fairly singular approach to understanding behavior became a much more nuanced opportunity for us.
Now, very interesting points. And I think one of the things that, I will also comment on this, Richard, is the team that you pick from a data science perspective and whoever leads that team, to some degree, they've got to back the decisions that they take as well. Yeah. And I'll put this point out there just as a little tidbit for thought is you've got to find a data scientist who can back the decisions that they're taking or the routes that they're taking. With Abhilash, you know what the standard statement is, right? You can either do what I tell you or I'll tell you what to do, which basically means the same thing. You're going to do what I'm going to tell you. And that's how he operates. But you need that. You need somebody to say, this is what I'm seeing, and we need to go down this path. And my expertise is telling me this, which is why data science is a very specialist skill. I will again admit this to a lot of people, is that everyone can get involved in data science in some degree or the other, but you need to know somebody who has tried and tested models to know where the journey is going to go. Otherwise, it can wreak a lot of havoc. Speaking of this, Ketan, my man, I want to bring you into the conversation now, because timing and data is not something we talk a lot about. Now, for our audience, I highly recommend if you go to the on-demand section, you'll watch that session I've done with Ketan, and I'm going to be doing more on it on going passwordless. Ketan was talking about user behavior when you authenticate users into an environment. Say you authenticate users to go into your platform, hopefully without a password in Ketan's word, but let's say you use a password. Ketan, one of the things that you've always been a proponent of is, I really don't care if somebody can tell me who they are at the gate. I also want to see what's happening when they're in the fort, because if they've faked their credentials, I will be able to sort of understand that something's off here. What you've been looking at is the timing of data, not just data from who logged in, but what they're doing while they're in an environment. How challenging can it get to actually get some of those data sets? And how are you working through all of that to create more intelligence into your access management module? Ketan?
That's a great question, right? So I think really when we look at the security aspect of things, right? So I think many organizations right now are really talking this whole concept around conditional access, right? So part of that conditional access, what do you mean by that? So really it's just the point of when I authenticate into something, or let's say when I VPN into my environment or my work network or school network, what is it that I am doing on a regular basis, right? So as you do things, you're establishing these patterns, right? So you could be a student, you would log in, you would come in, check your email, you would log into your learning portal. So over a period of time, this is the data that you can collect as part of that platform and sort of aggregate that data and say, okay, well, this is a normal pattern that we see for, John, for example, right? But now if that pattern shifts for John, where all of a sudden we're seeing a changes in those patterns on the typical behavior, then those can be used as sort of those red flags to say that, typically John used to do step A, B, and C, but today we see a step that is anomalous. So how do we now drive this, and do we now raise this up as a bubble from a security perspective, which could be a compromised account, which could be a compromised password or unauthorized access, right? So typically this is where, at least on the security side of things, this is how organizations are looking at and say, okay, well, how can we leverage sort of the AI ML aspects of this to sort of give us those elements to make additional decisions? And then, if we do see some level of red flags, then we're going to reprompt the user to basically say, identify, are you really who you say who you are, right? So I think those are some of the things that we're going to see moving forward. But I think part of the problem that we're even trying to solve is that, hey, yes, let's at least enable the step of moving away from passwords and leverage digital signatures. But then as you go in, then there's other ways to sort of understand what kind of risk is being added, and then how do you deal with this data and risk and types of the AI ML, all combined to really allow to ensure that you are the right person ultimately accessing the resource.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I really appreciate, the different perspectives. We've got location-based marketing, we've got, the healthcare side and the shift orientation, but then also from a security side, because user behavior really is, especially when workers are working remotely, that is the only way in which you can, for lack of a better word, monitor for everybody's safety. And the perimeter, as we talk about in the world of security, has shifted dramatically and is no longer the physical perimeter of the building where the security guard sees who you are, validates it, etc. It really has become a process of matching patterns. One of the things, and Ketan, you're going to put this onto a shirt and sell it on the cyber exchange walls. When you were talking, I reminded myself of something you and I spoke about at Women in Cyber, where I said, think before you trust, and trust in your thinking. As a data scientist, you have to think before you trust those data sets and trust in how you are thinking about that. And speaking about that and having confidence in your own models and confidence in how you're studying patterns, Abhilash, I want to bring you back into the conversation. You're in a situation now where you've got data. You've used certain techniques to identify, you've used some cognitive science techniques, you've used certain models, some mathematical equations to now draw patterns. You've classified the data, you know what the influences are on different modalities that you're looking at. Now you've got to start testing your model. You've made predictions right now that, for example, if we take Asif's model, that we will see a 40% increase in traffic to the Starbucks at 7 a.m. And if you take Richard's example, X amount of people are less likely to accept a shift the day before a long weekend. And if you take Ketan's example, malicious activities usually anticipated between 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., Monday, Tuesday, Friday. How do you go about testing these predictions? Is there any feedback loop that you have to put in there? Can you walk us through some of that process? And how do you build trust in some of these models? Abhilash?
Absolutely, yep. So before I talk about the feedback loop and everything, the user behavior analytics is now mostly inclined towards the security domain. But the user behavior can also be used in other domains as well, like the e-commerce and our own ShiftLink project and everything. So we can use there also, but it's more inclined towards the security, as I totally understand. Now, so before we actually test and everything, the first step is basically to create a solid goal, like an objective, or like what we want to achieve. Like, okay, fine, I want to build a model which say identifies anomalies. Now, plain simple as that. So first we have to define a solid goal for what we want to do, and now we have to build a data set which caters to that problem. So there is no point having data which is not answering our question. Like, for example, if I go back to the election data set which I was talking about, it's important that we create that from the entire data set, we remove the noise. And now in that case, the noise was actually the people who were younger than 18 and who were not citizens. So that is noise. So basically the point is we have to build the data set in such a way that it actually points towards the exact problem which we are talking about. And now take that data set, run the models across this, build the AI system, deploy it, and then test it, like real-time testing, like what would happen if we are say building a fraud detection system, like what Ketan was saying. If it's possible that we might have some false negatives, and in that case the feedback loop is very important. That, like, the person should tell us, like, probably you made a mistake on the model, and the model went wrong, and I was wrongfully not given access and all. So that feedback loop is very important, because the feedback loop ensures that ensures that for us to understand that we have built the right model. I mean, building the right model is okay, but the model is doing what it is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, for the audience, again, this is where that engagement piece with the industry partner is extremely important. I've said this before, and Dr. Viva Tyagi, when she opened today's conference, and even Ramsey from GM mentioned this, is that at the AI table, it's not just the IT engineers. It is the business decision makers. It is the marketing folks, etc. Everybody has to provide validation and input into the results that are being spewed out by the model. This way, you're able to identify any bias, any errors. This was fundamental, actually, in the successful deployment of a tool that is soon going to be featured in some of the courts within the region of Durham. And this had to do with prediction on ticketing systems and knowing whether or not you were actually going to have a ticket reduced in its fine or whatever else have you. And I want to give a shout out to Kalyan, the CIO from the region of Durham, for giving us that project. We have a bunch of projects coming up in the region, and we're always grateful to Invest Durham for their continuous support. Speaking of that, Richard, I want to bring you into the conversation. We'll go to Asif and then to Ketan. Abhilash, as always, in his philosophical self, I've always mentioned that if Abhi starts a religion, I'll be the first one to sign up, because he's got very deep insights. And he said, remove the noise and embrace the silence. Great, sounds metaphorically very rich. But Richard, as you're taking these AI models, or looking to take these AI models to some of your clients, are you seeing them as receptive to this automation, or are you seeing them as being a little skeptical of how accurate you might be in some of your predictions? What's the land like for you, Richard?
I would say they're wide open to this, Ali. I think they are so challenged internally with resources that they simply don't have access to not just this kind of data, but the analysis of the data. They don't have the resources, they don't have the people, the time, or frankly, the expertise. And so when we go to them, and I'll take a hospital as an example, and start talking to them about some of the data sets that we can bring to them, with, of course, the AI engine behind it, they immediately understand the potential value behind this. So yeah, just in having some very brief, very sort of initial conversations with some of our clients in the hospital social services sector, they're extremely excited about the potential for this.
Absolutely, and that potential is always where you realize that some of the things with AI is that the sky is not really the limit; it's just really the start. But you do have to caution and punctuate your approach with AI, because there are these nervousness that people have around the singularity around with AI and the ability of AI to actually overwhelm or even control decision making. And this is where I want to bring Ketan into the conversation, and then we'll go to Asif. Ketan, one of the things that you see a lot now, especially in the cyberspace when it comes to user prediction and user analytics, as Abhilash alluded to as well, is this whole aspect of false positives. Now, how easy is it to, for example, maintain human oversight into what your algorithms are telling you? Do you have to maintain particular controls in place? Is dashboarding to look at the data and visualizations extremely important for you? How are you on the go ensuring that some of these AI and predictive models can actually be checked and reviewed by a human expert. Ketan?
Yeah, so I think, so I think there's always going to be the human element or touch that's going to be needed, right? Like, I think I'm not too sure if we're going to be completely, again, this is me. I'm not going to talk on behalf of everybody else, but at least I feel that you are still going to need that human touch and element to really understand as to what you've put in from a model's predictions perspective today. Do we need to come back and reevaluate 6 months down the road, right? So I think there has to be some level of those constant human checks to ensure whether is it sort of meeting the needs and requirements. But I think there's the other aspect of that too, where, as you start sort of closing down those doors, right? And obviously the whole goal over here is that with a combination of machine learning, AI, it's going to learn the behavior, and it's going to create those patterns, which is great. But I think as you start closing down some of those doors, you will have to come back and reevaluate the things you've put in from a pattern perspective as to how do we tweak these things, how much percentage of these do we need to tweak, because now we have locked down some of those things, right? But I think there's definitely going to be need of a human intervention in there to sort of revalidate some of those things, and then sort of keep a constant eye as you grow, right? Because I think one of the things I've discussed in the past with other companies, right? And again, I'm not necessarily talking about identity fraud, but this is just even fraud from financial side of things, right? So you can even leverage algorithms and patterns based on understanding what are some other financial frauds, what's happening there, and then how you can kind of tailor some of these things to really help drive that level of prediction, right? But I think definitely need a human element to tie things together rather than just solely relying on AI.
Absolutely. And I think, you and I, again, at Women in Cyber, we had this brief discussion on this, is that, they say, right, what gets measured can get managed. And there's got to be certain metrics in place. And this is where, again, speaking to a lot of companies that do work with us at the AI Hub, I constantly remind them is that you need to be checking on these outputs. You need to have a system in place where you're looking at what the results are, and you should be able to a degree, explain it. This is why this concept of not just AI, but XAI, explainable AI, is taking a lot of runway right now, especially in the EU. And many of you would know that the EU has released a very important seminal paper around ethical AI, which I think is going to find some of its ingredients sprinkled into legislation here and into best practices here in Canada. But I think it's super important to have that ability to keep checking on what are the results, how many people did we block access to, why, and be able to explain that. Many of you have heard me talk about the mortgage case example where somebody comes in and says, oh, you were denied for a mortgage. Why? Because the AI said so. That's not the situation we want to find ourselves in. Speaking of that, Asif, I want to bring you into the conversation, because one of the things that Abhilash mentioned, and I know Richard knows this all too well because he's in the throes of a project right now. Abhilash has always taken the position that, too much of data is too little. Give me more. I need more, more, more. Now, from your perspective, one of the things that you've had to deal with as, and I mean this respectfully, as sort of growing your business in that startup phase, now growing it with Canatrace, etc., compute has been a major element to managing all of this. And we have a question that's come in terms of, yes, you can set expectations in terms of, I can get you all this data on users, but from a compute perspective, has it been particularly challenging to manage some of the costs around AWS environments, for example? What's that been like for you? And thank you to the audience member for that question. Asif? Asif is on mute. The line of 2021
I got it.
has returned.
We're there. Thank you for the question. It's a huge challenge. As a startup, we're bootstrapping, and we're raising capital and everything else, and trying to grow. But our business is all about data. We can't do anything. We can't make any predictions. We can't provide any insights to anybody, without high quality and high density of data. And so it's extremely expensive to acquire that in many cases. But the volumes of data that we currently process, it's comparable to some small banks in terms of transaction volumes on a daily basis. Like, we're processing petabytes of data, so therefore the computing of that, the storage of that, from an AWS, type of point of view, it can be onerous. It can be something that can really hamper the growth of a company. And so we've had to be very careful in how we handle that and find creative ways to process the data and do some things in real time or near real time and other things in batch and so on and so forth, right? Because it's just, if we try to do it all in real time, like we'll kill the machines, and we'll kill ourselves, and that's not good, right? So it's costly, but it's I think the nice thing about it is that if you can build a model that takes massive quantities of very distinct and very interesting data, and build a model that you can drive insights from in a way that you don't have to necessarily do that all in real time, then I think you can achieve some pretty interesting insights and predictions and things like that. And to your point about give us more, yeah, we even though we have a ton of data right now, we're not stopping with that. Like, we want to add on top of the location data and on top of understanding where the population's going at any given time, which is kind of what we're focused on. We want to layer on top of that POS data and census data and all kinds of other data, so that we can see, okay, 100 people visited this restaurant today, and here's how many transactions happened against those 100 people, and here's the demographic profile of the makeup of that area, and even tying it together with what Richard's doing and what Ketan's talking about. Like, I see it, like lots of synergies across data sets, right? Where, if I can look at our data and see how many people are visiting a place, over a week or a month or whatnot, and I can see peak hours and peak days and all sorts of interesting things based on foot traffic patterns, that can inform shift, work and how many shifts we need at certain times, or if we need to add more people and more resources or decrease at certain times. And if I look at our CanaTrace system and the work we're doing on symptom screening and helping with contact tracing stuff, as we move forward, vaccines are picking up. The need for screening should diminish because people are going to be able to show they have a vaccine, but the credentials and the identity around that, as you show up and show that, have to be secure. You have to be able to do that in a way that doesn't necessarily rely on password, to what Ketan's talking about. So I see all sorts of ways to tie data sets together, and that's the beauty of to me, what AI can do is take a lot of data coming from so many different sources and find all kinds of interesting patterns and trends out of it that none of us have envisioned on our own.
Absolutely. And speaking of data, Asif, we've also been using AI on all of our clients as well. So we do have that picture, which Abhilash is going to use as part of his work, where you have taken the vaccine, and we saw the picture with the Band-Aid. So these are all data sets that can be used and mined in different ways. As for me, I'm scared of needles, but if they mix the vaccine and biryani, I am in. So we'll deal with that at that time. But we've got about another 7.5 to 8 minutes. And Richard, there's a question that's come in, which I'm going to bring to you, and then we'll go to Ketan, Asif, and then wrap up with some closing comments. And this is a very, very interesting question. And thank you for the audience member for direct messaging this to me. The question says, when you look at a company like ShiftLink, or you look at a company even like, BlokSec, or for that matter, GroundLevel Insights, you've got an application that has programmatic script in it. It does certain things. You've got code. Now you have to layer on AI into it. How easy has that been for you, Richard?
Well, truth be told, we're still very much in the early stages of that. And I would say that we're taking a very sort of layered approach to that. So we've sort of scoped out the basics of our projects at this point, and are not trying to ram in an enormous amount of AI into our system right away. We've looked at this as initially anyway, and Abhilash, you can speak to this too, is about a 3-stage process. And that could be a 10-stage process, but right now we've just sort of mapped out 3. Yeah. So we're really sort of taking a very cautious approach, trying to integrate AI into our platform at a very basic level that will give our clients some functionality and give them some sense of what's to come, and the potential for it, but ultimately not trying to overwhelm the system, overwhelm our software engineers and UX designers. But also, I think it's important to take this sort of cautious approach, not just from a system perspective, but to really understand what should come next. Maybe step 2 should be step 3, and step 3 should be step 2. Abhilash talked about it. It's, you've got to test and learn, and so that really is part of the thinking as well. And again, I think the phrase here is go slow to go fast.
Absolutely, well said. And that's another one that I'm sure the social media team has picked up on, and another one for the t-shirts and the wall. So thank you so much, Richard, for that. Now, gentlemen, we have about 5 to 6 minutes, so we're going to keep our answers quick and short. A couple of more questions have come in, and again, related to user behavior. And I really, really like this question. And Ketan, I'm going to bring it to you. Ketan, how important is it now, especially when you're doing predictive analytics on user behaviors, for privacy policies to be more accessible? Ketan.
So again, that's a very interesting topic, right? So when we look at sort of privacy policies and, especially when we look at GDPR, CCPA, sort of the data you're collecting, and even some of the SASL requirements for us anyone in Canada, right? So I think, I think when we start looking at all these different elements from the data we're gathering to how we comply from a policies perspective, I think as an organization, you have to be careful and cognizant around what you're collecting, how are you collecting, and how are you are using the data, right? Especially for us, right? For us, when we look at you authenticating, we can capture all additional elements, as part of the mobile experience, but then we have to go back and say, are these the elements of data we need? Is this sort of useful to us, right? And I think going back to what also Richard was trying to say, right? Like you have to plan things, but you also need to understand what the data is that you leverage and you're using, and then how can you now apply that from an analysis perspective to make sure it kind of makes sense for you as an organization or you as an team within the organization to sort of leverage the data, and then also help drive it from how do you comply with that data, because ultimately the data compliance is a key issue now, and I think this is going to become a bigger and bigger challenge. And I think all of us, are kind of very careful around how our data is used, where is it being used, and then do I want to keep on sharing my data over and over again, right? So I think it's going to be, and this is going to be an interesting topic as we evolve more in sort of the privacy space, and how the predictive analytics is going to tie into these things, as the data elements, may be available today, but may not be available 2 years down the road.
Absolutely. And for the audience members that had more questions for Ketan, absolutely, Ketan, when you get the time, 1 or 2 questions related to shifts in data when it comes to COVID. So certainly keep them there to the audience, and Ketan will come in and respond. Another 4 minutes and we'll race through this. Abhilash, this is another direct question, which I'll bring to you. Let's say a company is at its early stages and wants to see if it can start working with some pattern recognition tools and some models. Are there any particular technologies you can point them to which they can start with and get their hands dirty to begin with, Abhi?
Well, there are some open source tools, like not exactly open source, but they have this trial versions, like the Power BI is there and Tableau is there, and there are some other open source tools also, which tools visualizations for you, so we can just plug in the data and see the patterns, like what's happening, like maybe how many people are working at a given time interval or something like that. What's the best selling, say, the food or whatever like that. So there are some things available.
Absolutely. But I will also underscore this in terms of, if you're going to do analytics and you're going to try to understand user behavior from that, it is a specialist skill set. And this is not just something Tableau, Power BI, and similar tools can help you. In some cases, I've seen in the energy sector, some people using Grafana. These are great to get visualizations. But if you want to start to actually derive more from those visualizations and run different kind of models, it is a specialist tool. And it is a tool that requires investment in human resources. Now, gentlemen, I've done this. I know that we're slightly over, but I'll take 2 or 3 more minutes. Since this conference is being hosted by Durham College, I'm going to ask you one question that is slightly off script. I know we can be doing more of these sessions, and I know you're all very busy, and I actually have to moderate the next session, so I do want to take a small little break. But this question is one that I thought of last night, and I figured, you know what, I'm going to throw this googly into our discussions. You've all worked at Durham College in one shape or fashion, especially at the AI Hub. I want each of you to think of a moment that you'll never forget, or an experience that stays close to you at the AI Hub, or a person at the AI Hub, and it cannot be me or Abhilash, that has really stood out for you. So, Mr. Khan, let's begin with you. One moment or one person at the Hub that has really left a marked impression on you in a good way.
Yeah. We've done a few projects with the hub, and I think, sort of the one person that, I think really fits well with us and understands the data that we have is Saba Siddiqui. I think, just a deep understanding of us, and I think really investing in us. It's not just here's a project and some students and whatnot they're going to work on, but taking the time to understand who we are, what we're about, what we're trying to achieve. And that really stood out to me in that it's true partnership, right? And ideas are just ideas unless you act upon them, right? And I find that partnering with the AI Hub is gives us a way to really action upon the ideas that we have. Because there's no shortage of ideas, right? But there's only so many we can do on our own, and so that's why we love working with the AI Hub.
Absolutely, and Saba will be on a session when it comes to natural language processing and healthcare, and I believe that session begins at 1 p.m., so stay tuned for that. Captain Bicknell, one moment or one person at the Hub that's left a marked impression on you.
Tough to choose from. I mean, Abhilash and the team, the students we've been working with, we've had a couple of really, really cool, exciting breakthroughs in the past few weeks that we're very excited to share with our customers. But I'm going to go with you, Ali. Quite frankly, I think your leadership, your mentorship, your guidance and advice that you've really opened our eyes as an organization and helped us understand what our true potential is. And I think, we can't thank you enough, can't thank Durham College enough, the students that we've worked with over the past year, and of course, Mr. Abhilash. But you've really been the catalyst for that. So thank you.
You're always welcome. And I think none of this would happen without the team effort that we have. Viva is on, Isabella is on, Spurti is on as well. Everybody who makes this engine go forward, including our deans, our president, all motivating us and empowering us to do things that truly allow us to not just think outside of the box, but as I always say, burn the box entirely. Mr. Kapadia, it cannot be me, but tell me about one experience perhaps, because your projects are soon to start, but tell me about one experience that you've had with Durham College where you go, wow, these folks are interesting. Ketan?
Well, so I think this is going back to the first time we met. And again, I think you were part of that meeting, but I think when me and Mike kind of walked into the room and when we actually interacted with some of the individuals there, where we're like, okay, these guys just don't know what they're talking about, but they actually know what they're doing. And this is something they're living and breathing every day. And I know you don't want me to use your name, but I think, as Richard mentioned, you've been sort of one of the key catalysts for us. And as we drive these conversations, sort of your leadership, your thought process, your input really helps us validate as we are also doing things and sort of working with the college as we look at adding capabilities, right? So.
Absolutely. And I have to agree with this. You've opened up our eyes to the world of access management. And because of this, we've got to meet numerous new companies like Cloud Entity. Shout out to people like Maddie, Priya Sharma. We've met other folks like Gilad and David. And this has all resulted in different projects for us. So the love goes both ways. And we thank you for not only trusting in us, but allowing us to tap into your vast network, which extends to some pretty accomplished individuals in the space of data, AI, and security. And the last word, because the line begins where Abhilash stands, the last word goes to Mr. Abhilash. One experience at the Hub that has really stood out with you, Abhi? or one project?
Well, it wouldn't be fair to point out one single project or one single person, but I'd definitely say I had this experience of working with a lot of students who came from a variety of backgrounds. Like maybe if I count, I can say at least 15 countries. People who came from students who came from 15 different countries. So that itself was a very enriching experience.
Absolutely. And you know what? I know he's listening backstage. Because of some of these students like Mauricio, you and I have improved our Spanish. To some degree, we've improved our Portuguese. And we feel like we are now worth $1 million and more because of being lingual in so many different languages. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute slice to be with all of you. I know you have extremely busy schedules. I'm going to ask you just to stay on while I end this session so that we can have a quick debrief for 30 seconds. In the
one last word.
Sure, Abhi.
One last word. Okay. Sorry for this, gentleman.
No.
Actually, people say, like, when we successfully complete a project, there is praise and everything.
Yeah.
But a lot of my success actually goes back to the students who I work with.
Absolutely. And the students are behind all of that. So Abhilash, you've been a catalyst for the students, and many of them have got jobs after being mentored with you. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time. We had a good audience, lots of questions that came in. I appreciate your support to Durham College. I appreciate your insight. And I really appreciate the fact that you took the opportunity to be here and approach AI from an interdisciplinary perspective. At Durham College, we are not saying that we've got the next best thing after sliced bread. We're getting there. But one of our main things has been enabling people with AI from multiple backgrounds. And you folks are a testimony to all of that. I'm going to ask you to stay on for a couple of moments while I close this session. To our audience, I look forward to seeing you in about 22 minutes when we will be discussing how do you use AI and recommendation system to improve learning outcomes. I'll be joined by Professor Sam Plati and Jahanzeb Abbas from BMO, who's also part-time faculty at the college. If there's one thing I've learned from this session today is that you're better off being productive rather than busy. And if you're going down a path with data and you're trying to ascertain user behavior, and if you don't know what you're doing, give Abhilash a call and he will help you out. Everybody, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you in 22 minutes. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.